Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another session of the Neota Network. This one is part of our justice and our government stream. I know we're getting down to the dog days of the Neota Network, but thank you for joining us again. And today's talk will be presented by Jonathan Jocham and Kevin Mulcahy. Jonathan is the Director of Markets and Growth in the Americas here at Neotologic, and as well, Kevin is our VP of Education and Community Programs. This talk is touching on how state governments are actually using the Neotologic platform to build smart, user-friendly, tailored guidance towards citizens. So these address key questions about legal rights, remedies, and as well some potential solutions and resources available. So I won't go in too deeply, but also this is something that, as I'm sure Jonathan and Kevin will touch on, is part of Neotologic's pro bono aspect and our community involvement aspect. That we have strong roots in the pro bono sense, but then as well to use the platform to help people. So on that note, what I'll do is I'll hand it over to Jonathan and Kevin. Please take it away.
Thanks, Max, and hi, everyone. I'm Jonathan Jocham of Neota, and along with my colleague, Kevin Mulcahy, I'm very pleased to welcome you to this session, which focuses on new ways that states are providing tailored guidance to citizens on legal rights and remedies. This topic is vitally important because life has become so complex and challenging for so many people over the last year and a half. At the same time, people have become even more accustomed to conducting their lives through applications, whether on laptops or smartphones. Today, we'd like to show you some advisor applications developed for the state of California with students at UCI Law School. In addition to touring the apps, we'll hear from some people behind those apps. You'll also get a sneak peek at the state's pipeline for more apps that provide tailored guidance to citizens. That's a quick overview. Now I'd like to turn the floor over to Kevin to take us through the apps.
Thanks, Jonathan, and hi, everybody. I'm so glad you've joined us today. The first one I'd like to focus on is this, the information app for tenants and landlords. This was developed about a year ago when California created a new law to help citizens avoid eviction. The app enables the user to define their situation, and then the app will give narrowly tailored guidance based on that situation. So here's a look at the app map behind this application. For tenants, the first thing the app does is sorts the tenant into one of these categories, and then in some cases it will go on and do a second analysis to determine whether the tenant is a high income tenant, and the rules for that require a lookup in a database and some calculations based on household characteristics. If the user is a landlord, the logic is different. First, the system asks questions to determine which of these 5 overall scenarios the landlord fits into, and then does another analysis to determine the particular collection scenario. Let's go through a typical case. We start with the preliminary questions that you see here. And this is a critical set of questions. You owe rent, and the system asks you for what periods you owe the rent. And the eviction protection law makes a big difference about rent owed for different periods. Hence, we need that information. Let's say we owe for both periods, as many people do, and yes, they got a notice to pay or quit. And the next key thing is, when did you get that notice? Because the law is very different based on when that notice arrived. I'll say I got it after September 1, and now the system needs to know a bit about my household income, because we have to do that high income tenant analysis. So let's say there are 3 people in the household. I'm going to put in a high household income because I'd like to show you how that's treated. Let's say the household income is that, and they're in this county. The system has what it needs, and it has developed a detailed report for the user. So here is the report. The situation is defined here, exactly what they told us, and then the appropriate guidance is provided. They're told exactly what they need to do in light of the periods that they owe the rent for and when they got their notice. And I'd like to point out that special provision here. You appear to have a higher than average income, so your landlord may require more paperwork from you. If the user clicks there, they can see how this high income tenant status was determined by this application. We explain the law, we recount the facts that they provided, and then we state the conclusion with an explanation. So there really can't be any question about whether that tenant qualifies or not. And that represents a lot of what we're trying to do here. We're trying to nip disputes in the bud, which is what a good lawyer does. They anticipate and they explain in such a way that the litigation never even makes it to court. That's what this app is doing on this question of high income tenant status. If the user wants to get the report by email, they can provide it and it'll show up in their email box. So that is the California COVID-19 info app for tenants and landlords. It has had quite a bit of use, and it really has been useful not just for people who are fearing eviction, but for housing advocates and for call center workers and for lawyers. They all can go to this one spot, answer some questions, and get a custom memo explaining how the law applies to that fact pattern. The next app I'd like to show you is the New Parents' Rights Advisor, also by the state of California. It's been up for about 8 months and has thousands of uses. It helps people understand their rights to job-protected time off as a new parent. Before we take a run through the app, let's look at the app map that the students put together on this. This gives us that high-level view of what the app does. First, simply asks the main questions and then uses reasoning to place the user into one of these categories. Those seeking pregnancy disability leave are put into one of these 6, and those seeking bonding leave are put into one of these 5. And this is the crucial thing the developers need to do when designing the app. They need to figure out what are the endpoints of the reasoning. According to the content experts, these are the appropriate breakdowns of the possible users of this app. And once this is established, it becomes easy to infer what questions have to be asked and what output text should be prepared. So after the app uses reasoning to place the user into one of these categories, there are some additional questions asked because the developers wanted to make the reports even more robust. So they asked things like, are you in a union? Do you work for a large company or a small company? And those factors will be used to tailor the report, not just based on the category, but on those additional factors. That's the big picture. Let's assume that we are seeking pregnancy disability leave. We're greeted by this message from the governor's office, which emphasizes that we understand the situation they're in, we're happy for them, and we want to be as helpful as possible. All good messages to come from a counselor. There is the disclaimer, of course, and there is the option to personalize your report with your first name, which we say we will not keep. Now the app asks the main questions. Do you work in California? Is your employer one of these? We'll say no to that. And yes to this question. Notice that the students did a very good job with these pop-up texts. And based on that information, the system is able to conclude that the user would qualify for pregnancy disability leave, but we want to gather some additional information to help tailor the report further. So here we're asking how much physical labor is involved in the job. Let's say it's a high amount and they work for a large employer and they are in a union. When we ask these kind of questions, we do try to have these why we ask boxes so that the user appreciates why we're asking the question and is more willing to answer accurately. So now we're done. And here's our message to the user. Good news, with some instructions, a tailored message, and now very specific tailored text that the user can examine by opening these expansion boxes. In just a minute or two, you can actually get a customized letter, head of the state, wishing you well and giving you very narrowly tailored guidance on an issue that's important to you. That's what we're doing with these state government advisor apps. The last California app that I'd like to share with you is the Fair Chance Guide for Job Seekers, which is still in development, but we can take a look at it now. This helps people recently incarcerated understand their rights to seek a job in California without being asked about their criminal record. Provide some good background information here, including a video with Brandon Butler, who we'll meet in a moment. Notice also that it is focused on two different audiences. One, the people with a conviction record, and those who want to help people with a conviction record. Those could be lawyers, probation officers, family members, or friends. All people who are in a position to use this app and then relay the guidance to the person who needs it. Let's assume I have a conviction record. The first thing we get is an affirming message from the state explaining that we stand with you. And of course the disclaimer, and then a series of questions that help us understand where this user is in their job search process. We're asking this question to make sure the law applies, looking to see if any exemptions from the law are applicable in this case, and we're going to dig in and find out what may have happened to this user. Let's say there was a job offer and it was revoked. The employer did tell them why, and they said it was because of the conviction history. Oh boy, there are going to be some violations here. So we want to know what happened. Did you challenge it? Did you tell them these reasons? How did they respond? They still didn't hire me. The system drills down, finds out exactly what happened with that user, and then provides a tailored guidance report. The wording of the report for the user is still in development, but I can show you this content document for the app, which indicates the many things that this app is able to determine, which is number one, the applicability of the Fair Chance Act. Secondly, the user's overall scenario, which the content experts have decided will be one of these 8 scenarios. And then critically, whether any of these violations appear to have occurred. And these are the specific violations that the app is testing for. And then finally, the quantity of violations is counted up by the app. The violation summary conclusion is reached. And with that information, the app can apply this qualitative description to the severity of the violations that have occurred. So this is a good example of how we help law students learn to break down legal issues into discrete possible conclusion values, create rules to set those values, and then create corresponding advice. So that's a preview of the Fair Chance Guide for Job Seekers, which will be out this fall. And apps on these topics and others are now in development for the state of California at the University of Denver Law School and Cornell Law School. So a lot is happening in this space. And to help give you a sense of how the state officials in California are thinking about these applications, we recently sat down with Brandon Butler of the California Department of Fair Employment and Housing, which is the agency behind the apps you've just seen. And I'd now like to share with you portions of that interview with Brandon.
The reaction was tremendous, both externally and internally here in the state of California to the app, because what it did is at a time when there was a critical eviction crisis and there was a new law coming in into the fold to protect Californians, there was really no way to have an interactive way to engage with a Californian about their rights under the new law. And what this app did is it filled a void where it was able to give critical information on a complicated subject in a synthesized way where the average Californian without a housing law background could access their information. And in some ways, I think this app was critical to preventing homelessness and evictions because it gave people hope and information at a time when they were in a critical crisis. So I think the reaction was great, and we've seen over 100,000 folks access the app, which I think is a testament to the quality of the app and how that it filled a critical void at a time when there was a crisis. No, that's a great question. I think the reaction that I've been hearing is really folks saying, how did this happen? How are you able to do this? They're interested in how something could be created so quickly and satisfy the unmet needs of educating their constituents on legal processes. So I think really the reaction has been, how can folks harness this type of technology, this type of content ability to be able to synthesize complicated subjects on a variety of areas that government intersects with. And I think people are seeing this as a new tool to, kind of crack the code, so to speak, on how do you connect with the public. And I think that people are seeing this as a way to synthesize that information, connect with the public in a way that folks are now communicating by, which is by app, which is by web-based app, to get immediate answers to questions versus pouring through an FAQ or guidance, page after page, and it's not tailored to your individual situation. So I think it's really opening that door of how do you give tailored information to the public without having to pour through pages and pages of information. The app does that really for folks, and I think that's what we're talking about.
Brandon has really done a great job making sure that California is leveraging technology to communicate effectively with citizens. And another person who's been influential in the development of these apps is former Senator Joseph Dunn of the California legislature. Joe has extensive experience in state government and in the private sector in the technology domain, and he's now a special advisor to the dean as well as an instructor of the AI Frontiers course, through which UCI law students have worked on the apps that you've seen. I'd now like to share with you some excerpts of an interview we recently did with Joe about these apps and government's use of technology to guide citizens.
During this transition phase for governmental agencies and delivering services or information tailored about rights and remedies in here in California, but I think true throughout the nation, it's a generational issue. Older government workers who are nearing retirement are more resistant to it. That's my generation. We faced a lot of issues adopting technology where unfortunately it went very badly. Not to point fingers at anybody, probably a lot of times it's a government agency's fault. Sometimes it may be an outside entity that's at fault. But when a government agency fails on technology, it becomes front page news and very embarrassing to all involved. So that's caused a lot of reluctance. But as the next generation takes mid-level and senior positions in these government agencies, you're seeing much more willingness to learn, to embrace, to experiment. The costs are far lower now than they were decades ago during the early stages of adopting technology. This is the prime point with this generational change from my generation, the baby boomers retiring, to the millennial generation coming up in their young years. This is where the adoption and use of emerging technology to deliver government services and information is going to accelerate and expand exponentially, which is only a good thing, despite the older generation's reluctance to do so for our own reasons along the way.
Thanks everyone for joining us today. I hope you found the app tours helpful, as well as the insights from Brandon and Joe. There's a lot of great things happening in this space as a result of no-code platforms. If you'd like any more information or have any requests, please don't hesitate to reach out to Jonathan or me using the emails shown here. Thanks everyone.
Thank you so much, Jonathan and Kevin. A lot of great information in there, a lot of important work to be done. And as well, I think that the public space, the public sphere is often one that's overlooked a bit in legal technology, but nonetheless super important as well, the pro bono aspect to everything. So thank you very much. And thank you very much to everyone who's joined us today. I know we have a little bit of content left, so I want to thank you all for taking the time to join this session. But we will see you in the next session of the Neota Network, and I'll look forward to it. So thank you very much again for joining, and we'll see you soon.